Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe, galaxy, Australia. And now, finally, let's go over to the wonderful, lovely nation of New Zealand. You are my first guest all the way down under, all the way from New Zealand, which is a
Oh,
very
wow.
special. I believe you are the first New Zealand person to ever be on the show, and welcome aboard. We're
Oh,
glad to
thank
have
you.
you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. So, Christy, I gotta say, our truly spectacular embassy in Australia for Aaron's Opinion. Christy Stichter has been telling me a lot about you. I understand you're a musician. You teach music. Your academics are in the field of sociology and psychology. You work as a
That's
digital
right.
note taker. You do a lot of things for the blindness community all the way down under in New Zealand. So, Mara Kelland, why don't you kind of jump into the conversation here and help us by answering my question? And you can take this conversation to talk about your music that you produce. Really, anywhere you want
Mhm.
to take the conversation, I'll let you take it there. And of course, I definitely want to know all about your life and basically tell me everything you want me to know and don't tell anything you don't want me to repeat. So I'll turn the microphone over to you and I will ask my question and mute my microphone. Who is Mara Kelland? Go.
Myra Kelland is totally blind. Myra Kelland is an ex-psychologist and mystic and tarot reader and musician. I was born in 1987. I was an oxygen kid. I was a rot baby, and there were a lot of rot babies, retinopathy of prematurity, ROP. There are a lot of ROP babies between 1950 and 1990, basically, because they didn't really know what they were doing with preemie babies. So, in other words, I'm lucky to be alive. Um, I teach the piano. I've played the piano since I was 7. And I was a Suzuki kid. And so when I decided that I wanted to teach when I was about 18, I was looking for something that was sort of, oh, somebody's joined us. Is that a troll?
Negative. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that at the end of the
Oh,
conference. I know who it is. That's the South Africa
you know
office.
who it is.
He's muted. Thank you for asking. He's muted, and that's the South Africa Embassy of Aaron's Opinion. Yes, go right ahead. Uh-huh.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay, carry on. Anyway, when I decided that I wanted to teach, I decided I wanted sort of a Suzuki approach, but sort of with a contemporary spin on it. And I discovered Neil Moore's Simply Music program. At the same time, I was studying psychology um, at Auckland University of Technology because I decided that I didn't want to do a music degree because I figured it would make me. I wanted to keep my options open, so I did a BA in psychology at Auckland University of Technology. And I was not a very good psychology major, but psychology is an interesting science, a really interesting science. And still very much interests me. I've rehashed my degree about 5 times, or parts of my degree about 5 times, because of my job. And yeah, that's basically it, I guess.
Well, I don't think that's basically it. I think that's just the beginning, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's the beginning, basically.
right. So why don't we walk through this a little bit why don't we kind of unfold this a little more? So, for example, take, for example, a listener who does not know what ROP is. Now, I will tell you in my
Written
own
officer for maturity.
right.
Okay.
Why don't now I will tell you though that I was born with glaucoma. I was born in
Mm,
1991. I was born with glaucoma.
yeah.
So for those who are less familiar with retinopathy of prematurity, ROP, why don't you break that down, Mara? Because and really tell us what it is. Tell the listener at home what it is. Because there's a lot of confusion, as you well know, between
Yeah.
ROP and RP, and it's not the same thing.
It's not
So,
the same thing, no.
but they're
So
confused often.
RRP,
Right.
yes. So RRP, retinopathy of prematurity, is when, due to premature birth, baby is given too much oxygen because that's just how they used to do it. Flooded with oxygen, and that damages the retinas, and the retinas detach and basically screws up your eyes. That's my limited knowledge of what is RRP. RP is retinitis pigmentosa, which is a gradual deterioration of eyesight. And so they also end up blind. Um, it's kind of interesting. One of the things I used to do when I was at university, because art has kept me sane for a very long time, but I used to paint pictures, and I started painting pictures on a dare from a friend of mine because she figured a blind person couldn't paint a picture. But what she didn't know was that I used to be able to see really big pictures, so I just took all my memories, made them all into abstract paintings. But that's a side note to what is wrong.
Right. That is fine. That is a fine
Yeah.
side note. Absolutely, that is. Yes, that's a very good side. That's a excellent side note to go on. By the way, yes, absolutely. Okay. All right. So, like I said, Mara, you're our first, or at least one of our first connections and guests from New Zealand, right? Why don't you break
Mm.
down and kind of break down the lifestyle of New Zealand, talk about New Zealand, talk about growing up in New Zealand. I mean, we up over in
Yeah.
America, we don't hear much from that New Zealand country. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about some of your fondest memories or most interesting memories growing up in New Zealand and really what it's like to be from New Zealand?
Okay. Well, I went to blind school for preschool half of the time, and I also went to what is called play center. That's about learning through play, and it was really funny because all the mums, because it's parent run. The play center movement is parent run, and so they had never had anyone with special needs turn up there. And all the mums just discovered in the process that they could get paid to be teacher aides. And they so pretty much all of them became teacher aides after they met me. Some of them, two of them, I think, are still actively involved in the school system, helping disabled people in schools as teacher aides. I don't know what happened to the rest of them. Anyway, New Zealand, the pace of life is slower than America. Um, some part of it is mountainous, part of it is not. It's very rural in some parts, and the urban-rural divide is very obvious in some parts. It's kind of like it has the same sort of feeling as California. I went to California in 2013, and California is very like New Zealand. We grow a lot of produce. And we have a lot of dairy and sheep farming. You might know New Zealand for the sheep. Um, and what else? Uh, that's all I can think of right now.
Sure, 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 sure. So, talk a little bit more in detail regarding to your educational background. So, in other words, not your university, but your education as a
My
child and moving through the
primary
school
school.
system. Sure,
Yeah.
your primaries and
Okay.
secondary and your high
Yeah.
schooling that would lead you
Yeah.
up to university. Obviously, you did well. So, talk about your experience
Yes, I
navigating New
did.
Zealand education. Sure.
But it's a very interesting process. It was a very lonely process in retrospect because they had started to mainstream like in 1984, I think. They started mainstreaming primary students in the mid 80s who were blind. And so I used to spend a lot of time in my school with one teacher learning what is called the expanded core curriculum. So Braille and typing and stuff like that. You know, the extra things that you have to learn because you are blind. Um, I was not exactly sporty, but I used to be a very good swimmer. I swam right through primary school and high school, and I had a New Zealand record briefly. Someone probably stole it off me now because it was like 20 years ago, a bit longer than 20 years ago. But I was playing the piano, um, Suzuki style, and then that's I started Suzuki piano when I was 7. And then during high school, I did some music exams and stuff. So my musical background is really rather eclectic. But I was very good at history. I got second in history 3 years running at high school. And I liked to write. I liked English and history is one of those social sciences, humanities things. Um, When I left school, I thought I wanted to be a journalist. And I'm like, okay, I'll be a journalist. So I have an associate degree, a certificate in freelance journalism. And then after high school, I went to a transition program out at the blind school for a year where they teach you, other expanded core curriculum stuff like daily living and how to clean your house and all that sort of stuff, which I'm still not very good at. But anyway, there's the hat.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So, what can you tell us, when you think about the New Zealand education system, what do children learn, specifically?
Okay.
What do they focus on in the New Zealand education? Mm-hmm.
I remember I found my old exercise books recently. They were in a cupboard somewhere, and I found old exercise books. And I remember, the learning to write. Learning to write for me was far more fun than learning to actually read. Learning to read was pretty painful, to be honest.
Sure.
And so
It's understandable.
anyway, learning to write was more fun. And so it says things in there like, I like the little ball, and I like my dad, and I like my mom. And it was kind of interesting because I also discovered we used to call it theme. It was like social studies and science combined into one subject. This is in primary school, right? And I discovered this old social studies science book. It says technology all around, and we had to put together this ballpoint pen, which was really exciting to me. I still remember putting together this ballpoint pen and figuring out how it actually worked. Um, what else can I tell you? I wish that airplane would piss off. It's too noisy, that airplane. Sorry about the background. It's somewhere down here. We got cicadas.
That's okay. We cannot hear the cicadas.
You can't hear the
No, no,
cicadas.
we
Oh, that's
can't hear
good.
them up
That's good.
here. No, that's
Oh, that's
good.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good. I just wondered because I'm like, oh, they're really loud down here. Anyway, assembling ballpoint pens. We did lots of experiments in science with wheels and pulleys and levers. In maths, um, arithmetic. I remember lots of, because I was not very good at maths. I'm still not very, I got like 50 out of 50 in just before high school in like maths test, which was, well, what you're supposed to get, I guess. Well, maybe not what you're supposed to get. But I got 50 out of 50 even though I wasn't very good at maths. I liked sort of the artistic stuff more than the mathsy, sciencey stuff. I used to like drawing a lot. I used to love art. I remember making, coloring a paper in layers of crayon and then scratching with a pair of scissors different pictures in it. You layer yellow, red, blue, black, and then we paint it over the top, and then so your colors all drain through. And I have used that technique in my own artwork later. Um, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that is very, very interesting. Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like the schooling was very active. It sounds like they really encourage a lot of active learning there in New Zealand. That's
Oh
what it really
yes.
sounds
Oh
like to
yes.
me. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. By the way, this is kind of a silly question, but I love to talk about history, and for me, history is always one of my favorite subjects.
Oh, I love history.
Good. So,
I
that's
can tell
good.
you history of New Zealand if you want, but that would get boring, though.
That would actually, not at all. That would get very interesting. So, by the way, what does Zealand mean? Why do they call it new? What's New Zealand?
Oh, you don't,
Um,
you
really
don't know
break down
this?
what that
Okay.
all means. Like,
Um,
what's Zealand?
what is
What's,
New Zealand? Okay. Zealand is a place in Holland. And, well, okay, it was when Abel Tasman discovered New Zealand in 1642. And, it was initially called Statenland. And then in 1769, Captain Cook, James Cook, he turned up and he navigated the country and mapped it for the first time. It was inhabited by Maori at that point. It has to be noted that does. And anyway, he renamed it New Zealand because he figured it looked like Europe. But the ultimate intention was that New Zealand be better than parts of Europe. So we had in the 19th century, when after 1840, when the British signed the Treaty of Waitangi with the Maori, there was lots of settlers from there, and the plan was to make sort of a classless utopia that was better than Britain, and they called it. It was going to be called Little Britain for a while, actually. Um,
Right, right, but they didn't call it Little
but
Britain.
ultimately, it's New Zealand
But
because I really don't
they
know
got the
why it's
yeah. But what I'm wondering is what does the prefix mean? Like
the
Zealand, like
Z
what does the
prefix.
yeah? What does the Z
I'm not
part? The Z
sure. I'm not
yeah.
actually sure.
Well, I think
Um,
it has to do with one
not
of the
actually
estimations I
good.
would make is it probably relates to actually the fact that there is a group of people who live in New Zealand. I don't know what the group is called, but I do know that if you grow up in New Zealand, you speak an ancient language. At least you're taught to speak the ancient
Okay.
language.
That the group is called Maori, Maroi. There is no S in Maori, so we don't call them Maoris. We call them Maori. We everybody learns English is ubiquitous here, but everybody learns a smattering of Maori and can sort of say, hello, what's up, kind of thing, by the time they leave primary school. And it's so Maori is becoming Maori has the Maori language, Te Reo Maori, has been revived in the last 30 or so years. And so on the radio now, they don't say, well, they do say good morning, but on the news, but they also say Kia ora, blah 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 blah. Kia ora is good health in Maori, and it can be used for a greeting or for a farewell.
I actually knew about that.
Oh, you
And
knew that?
that's deeply fascinating to me because I speak English
Yeah.
and I speak French. Je parle français, bonjour,
Yes.
like that.
Oui, oui.
So
Mm-mm.
being a bilingual guy, I really appreciate when countries
Yeah.
maintain and revive an ancient language. The Maori, you're saying the language of New Zealand, which this is really good trivia for anyone who's into it. You're saying that the actual language of the country, in addition to English, is the other language that is spoken. The ancient language would be Maori, like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, like that. And
Wow.
the
Really?
other, this is useless trivia too, but the other thing that is interesting is, English is not an official language of this country. It is just
Right.
ubiquitous because the British colonized us, like they colonized you guys. Anyway, well, sort of. It's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it? But the other official language is New Zealand's Sign Language.
Really?
Yeah, really.
That is deeply compelling. Why would New Zealand Sign Language, the language for people who cannot hear, the language for people who are deaf,
Definitely.
right?
Dare. Yeah, yeah.
And
The
why would that
deaf
be an official
community.
language?
Why is this an official language? Because it's really interesting because I write notes for a lot of deaf people at AUT. AUT, Auckland University of Technology, is very deaf oriented. And so I really don't know the background to why we have the NZSL Act, the New Zealand Sign Language Act, which made New Zealand Sign Language an official language. What I do
That is
know
so cool. That is super
is
cool.
that the deaf people did a lot of agitating for it.
Okay, well, that's why, because
Yeah,
perhaps
basically.
the deaf community stood up for themselves in New Zealand
Yeah, the
and
deaf community
demanded,
stood up for themselves.
and
That's
Mara,
basically what happened. Yeah.
that's, Mara, that's something that I wish the blind community would do. That's a pretty good segue, if I do say so myself.
Well,
There
the
are times
blind
where
community in New Zealand.
I wish that us blind people like me, you, and South Africa office, who's on mute over there, we'll unlock him at the end of the conversation.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
kind of wish us blind people would do a little bit more standing up for ourselves. So this is super, super cool to learn about the ancient language, Maori, and then also the New Zealand Sign Language. So does that mean that there are many, many, many deaf people? Like, is it that there is both a significantly high percentage of the New Zealand population are deaf, or is it
No.
that the significant population of the deaf people in New Zealand did an effective job of advocacy. Which one is it? I think it's the advocacy thing,
It's
right?
the advocacy bit, yes. It's the
That's
advocacy bit,
okay.
yes.
This is
And I
super.
have to tell
I just
you,
have to tell you. I just have to tell you. This
Oh,
is
okay.
really, really, really good. This is really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And listeners of Aaron's Opinion are going to learn a lot about this. If you don't mind me saying, before you get back to what you were saying, so do you have a lot of deaf friends?
No, I don't
Oh,
have, I have worked with them as their
okay. I
writer, as
understand.
their scribe, but I don't have
Mm-hmm.
many different.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, I would need to sit with a sign language interpreter to talk to them, which I have done. And it's interesting. Or I
Oh,
write
that's
to
so
them. Sometimes
well,
I have written stuff to
believe
them.
it. Well, believe it or not, trust me when I tell you, they are welcome. If you ever encounter a deaf person who's, downloads the podcast, and they wouldn't be able to quite listen to what we're saying, but of course they would be able to get a transcript of the podcast. So yes,
Yeah, transcript.
deaf
I was
people,
gonna ask you.
people who cannot hear
Transcript.
actually still download podcasts because they're able to get the transcript. So certainly a deaf person
Yeah,
is always
I
welcome
know.
here. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
For
And
sure.
now this is
So
the other
what were you
interesting
going to, yeah,
piece
you
of
were going to go dig into something else
information.
interesting. Go right ahead.
I
Sure,
was
sure.
gonna dig into the organized blind movement in this country, a little history of the
Dive in head
organized blind
first.
movement.
Go for it.
We had around the time of probably before the NFB, yeah, before the NFB was founded in 1940. The blind of New Zealand was starting to organize in the 30s. They didn't have a formal organization of a consumer organization until 1945, right? But the point of organizing was to sort of unionize, because what happened back in the day was what was the Institute for the Blind? You went to school there, and you worked in their workshops, and you made baskets, and you know, as a blind person, you worked in their workshops, and you made baskets, and you made coat hangers, and you made pots, and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't well paid work. It was boring work. It was repetitive work. So the point of founding what was then the Dominion Association of the Blind, the DAB, was to unionize the workshops and get some appropriate working conditions and stuff. And what happened was after that in the 50s, it's the oldest. The Association of Blind Citizens of New Zealand is the oldest disabled persons organization in this country, the oldest consumer group of disabled people. I think the deaf one came later, but deaf Aotearoa come later. But what happened was, this is an interesting piece of history. The Association of Blind Citizens, they lobbied to abolish the means test for benefits. So consequently, I can get a benefit from the government because I am blind, and I can work for income. And that is not tested, nor is the income of my parents tested.
By tested, I think you used a word that we don't use it quite in the same way here up over. By tested, do you
Yeah.
mean that you don't have to yeah, I didn't understand what you said. Explain it maybe differently. Maybe tested means that you don't have to
Abolishing the
prove.
means test.
Yeah, what
Yeah,
does
you
that
have to,
mean?
well, yeah.
It's not
What's
meaningful to
abolishing
me.
the means test?
Yeah, what does that mean
Okay,
though?
abolishing the means test means that essentially, if it's means tested, it's based on how much money your family earns or you earn. So that's the means, essentially. So they abolished the means test for blind people. What else can I tell you about
Meaning,
blind citizens?
please hold on. Meaning
Oh,
that
hold on. Sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine. So you're
Yeah.
saying that now in New Zealand, blind people have to acknowledge to the government how much they make, or they are exempt
No,
from.
they don't. They
So
are
in other
exempt
words,
from acknowledging how much they make.
So in other words, a blind. Okay. So in other words, just to clarify, because there's a lot of ambiguity from country to country. So you're saying that if Mr. Opinion wants to come to New Zealand and be a billionaire, they aren't gonna take my money, or they aren't gonna ask me if I'm a
No,
billionaire.
no, they're gonna. You automatically qualify for a benefit, a pension in this country.
Okay, so in other words, basically what you're saying is the New Zealand government simply has decided to just assign pension to people who are blind in New Zealand.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
okay.
that's right.
Now the question which I think I already know what the answer is. Well, then if you don't have to acknowledge your income, then how much money does the government, how many New Zealand dollars do they allot for each blind person? How does that work? That's a very controversial and messy thing here in the
Yes,
States. Yeah.
yes, I gather it's messy over there. Half an hour is very messy. But there's a base. I'm not going to tell you how much it is because I don't think that's right.
Sure,
Because
sure.
then you would know consequently what my income is. But anyway, there is a base rate, and on which every blind person gets, and on top of that, you can get supplements. It's roughly $400 for an adult
In other words, you're saying that the government allots
per week,
let's say around 400 New Zealand dollars a month for a blind
a
person.
week, a
A
week
week.
for a week for a blind person. Yes,
A week. Ooh la la. Boy, that's a lot.
yes, it is a lot.
That's okay. Well, then as we
And
say,
any money you make on top of that is taxed, obviously at standard rates, but you don't have to declare it.
right. So if you, well, okay. So if you're taxed based on your income,
Yeah.
then you don't have to declare it. But then how do you? I guess what it comes. I guess since you brought it up, so then how does the taxation work then? If you don't have to declare it, how do they know how much to tax you?
Because you have two separate income streams, your supported living payment, that's what it's called, the benefit.
Right.
And then your other income is taxed in a separate stream.
Right. Okay. Okay. So probably there's a lot of social offices that deal with
Yeah,
this and help people to.
there are, yes.
That's good to make sure that they are getting the right amount of money and
Oh,
still
yes.
paying well, you would say, oh yes, let me tell you, in American society, this is a huge problem, getting people to pay
Yes.
taxes properly. And I'm proud of myself because I know that I pay my taxes perfectly each year. But a lot of
Mm,
people, because when you have a big country, you have a certain percentage of the population, Mara, that refuses to pay taxes. You have a certain
of course you
percentage of
do.
population that pays too much. You have the other percentage that pays the
Yes.
right amount, and then you have the other percentage that doesn't pay the right amount. So
Mhm.
what you end up with is the country doesn't have enough money because money has to be shuffled around. It's a
Yeah.
constant. Now, if we develop some sort of software system to help people to pay precisely what they owe based upon their income, then perhaps that would
Mhm.
be an argument that could be made, but probably not because of course, as you know, well, these things are always
Because
easier said than
you guys have federal tax and state tax and other
done.
tax I don't even know, right?
Right, because when you have a huge country like America, you have to
Yeah.
pay your municipal tax based on where you live in your community, then you pay your state tax where you are, then you pay the federal tax. And this is always a
Yes.
cause of controversy, and there's some blind people that believe, for a variety of reasons, that blind people just shouldn't be taxed. There's some
Yes.
social people that believe that blindness is the tax. You're taxed. In other words, some people would say, well, that's enough of a challenge,
Yeah.
where other people would say, no, no, if a blind person works, they're expected to make the same
Of
contribution
course.
as anyone else well, I
That's what
agree
I
with
reckon.
you, and you're right, and we're correct about it. But there's a lot of debate about that. Actually, there's more debate than you would realize. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
a very interesting thing. Okay, what else can you tell me about this organized blind movement and blind people
About the
in New
organized
Zealand?
blind movement in New Zealand.
Sure.
Well, we have lobbied. I was chair of the local chapter or the local branch for 2 years during COVID, just before COVID. Yeah, just before COVID hit. And it's really interesting because we spend a lot of time at those meetings talking about public transport and about obviously there are other issues besides public transport. But we spend a lot of time talking about public transport and footpaths. But in terms of footpaths with overhanging trees and all sorts of things like that, that's what the branches do. But the bigger issues, we have lobbied extensively the service provider over the years in the history of blind citizens has lobbied extensively the service provider, that's Blind Low Vision NZ now, to check, to work as a watchdog sort of thing, and sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, Um, Yeah, that's the short history. There have been protest marches, and there may be again. There
Sure,
hasn't been a
right.
protest march in a long time, but there was one in 19. This is an interesting thing, and the audio of this is available on the internet. I can send you a link if you want to read, if you want to hear this. But the organized blind movement in 1978 marched up Queen Street, which is the main street of Auckland City, which is not the capital, but it is the largest city in New Zealand, because the the service provider, which was then called the Royal New Zealand Foundation for the Blind, had changed. A lot of blind people worked in its library, and the library was accessible. But what they did was somebody turned up and he decided one day, I'm going to change the whole circulation system into a print system from a braille system. So blind citizens marched. They did not win, but we gained some ground in terms of blind people getting work in this country, and we're still saying the same thing 50 years later. Years 50. I forget how many years. Can't do maths. Quite a while later, we're saying the same thing. People should hire us, not because we're blind, but because we're good workers. Essentially,
Sure, absolutely. You know,
yeah.
this is a constant issue
Yes, of
all across
course.
our listenership all over the world, that what I'm consistently
Yeah.
noticing is the same. And you know, Mara, you may have thought that, and you probably didn't think this, but I'm just being philosophical. One may have thought that the experiences that blind people have from country to country would be very different based on the country. And actually, what I'm
Then,
finding is twofold. You got it. They're not that different. There are some
mm,
differences, but
mm.
the similarities are shocking from country to
Oh
country.
yes, oh
Blind people are
yes,
still not being employed. Blind people are still
yes.
living at home. Blind people are still not participating enough in society from country to country.
Hmm.
And I've spoken
Hmm.
to people, and we have someone right there. His name is, of course, Latabo, and he'll be joining us later at the end. He's the South Africa office of Aaron's Opinion. Once you
Yes.
join our WhatsApp communities, I'm sure you already know the guy around the community, because he does tremendously great work for blind people all over the universe. He's just a great friend. He's just a great person to have
Oh,
in your corner.
I
Yeah,
know somebody you know, I think.
more
Let's
than
have
like,
a, probably know
yeah.
somebody you know. We will talk at the end. Um,
Right, right. Because I would
I'll
be
ask
shocked
at
if you
the
didn't.
end.
I'd be shocked if you didn't know him. Yeah, yeah. He's
Because
incredible.
I don't think I've met Latava, but I do
Really, you
think I know
haven't?
somebody he knows. No, I haven't met
Oh well,
Latava.
who do you think you know that he knows? Because if you know somebody that he knows that you think you know, then I probably know that same person. Who's this person that you
Okay.
think he knows that you know that I know?
Do you know Martine Abel? Her maiden name was Abel, but then she is South African. She came to New Zealand. She got married. Now she calls herself Martine Abel Williamson, and she is president of the World Blind Union, the WBU.
Here's the answer. The answer is twofold. No, I don't know that person. But Mara, can you make sure that that person is the next guest on Eric's Opinion?
I can try, yes. I'll see what I can do. I'll send her, I'll send
That
her,
would
I'll talk
be
to her,
an incredible.
basically.
I mean, how
She's
well do
got
you?
an incredible story.
Well,
I
so do
can
you.
do that for you.
Well, I think you, I actually, I promise you, you're now the New Zealand embassy for air. You're now the New Zealand office of Aaron's Opinion. So now we'll have Christy
Oh,
from
thank you.
Australia. And, oh, absolutely. Yeah, anything you can do to get the next guest, as we say. Not because you're not, and it's not to say that your episode is not to be the most important or the least important. It's just the
Yeah,
fact
yeah,
that
yeah.
in the podcast space, you always have to build rapport, dig the well.
Sure you do.
Somebody in the space who I'm not going to name drop who it is, but he said something that I love. He always used to say, you have to dig the well before you're thirsty. So you always have to reach
Yes.
down there and pull up your next great
Hmm.
conversation, because that's what podcasters do. I really love talking and having these important
Yes,
conversations. That's someone that I don't
yes.
know. And more than likely that person you mentioned, Latabo, probably knows who it is, but probably doesn't. I don't know, but we'll put him on later. Anyway, though,
Yeah.
that's
Anyway,
really really deeply fascinating. What are some other key points you can tell me? And another interesting thing too in the States that I want to highlight, Mara, is that in American society we have several different organizations that support the blind. We have National
yes.
Federation of the Blind, American Council of the Blind,
Council of the
American
Blind. Yeah, I knew
Foundation
about
of the Blind.
those.
Good. NFB, AFB, ACB. And you know what I think, and I'm going to get some interesting, colorful comments in the chat box here. Some people would say, nope, NFB does it the best. Nope, ACB does it the best. No,
Yeah,
AFB does
yeah,
it the
yeah.
best. No, actually, we need, you know what? We need all of those organizations to work with us
Yes,
and
you
together
do.
because
Yes,
because
yes.
there's so many blind people with so many problems and so many challenges. We need as much
Mm-hmm.
help as we can get. So no, we need to
Oh,
work. We
yes.
need all those organizations that, and I do disagree when people come to me and say, well, no, Aaron, I'm only going to support ACB or I'm only going to support NFB or I'm only going to support this. I would tell them, well, I understand you. I get the branding and the marketing that's been
Yeah,
done by all these
yeah,
organizations.
yeah.
And I don't fault them for that. I'm not arguing. I'm not faulting them for
Mm-hmm.
marketing. Fine, go do it, market. But don't limit yourself to one organization because we as
Yeah.
blind people, we need all the help we possibly can get. We need every breath of air we can possibly take. We need to take it. So
Oh,
what I want
yes.
to know
Oh,
is
yes.
in New Zealand society, in your country, so does your blind organization, do they have like national conventions just in New Zealand each
Yep.
year? Like how
Yep.
does that work? Talk about it.
Yeah, it's
Go.
called a national conference. Um, I think it's really boring. I probably shouldn't say that, but anyway, I think national
I think
conference
you just said it. So I think it's
is
boring too.
pretty boring because it's like it's presentations essentially from government,
Hmm.
and they talk about all the good things that they are doing for blind people, and we have, you know, things to we start making the organization starts make the consumer organization starts making the plans of how what they're gonna lobby for the next year through the remits process, right? Which comes from the branches. Um, so convention is not that exciting to be honest. But it's a convention and we get together and that's really important, as you said. You know, but what you gotta remember is we're a small country and we only have we have one service provider, one consumer, well, two consumer organizations actually, and we have one guide dog school for the whole country, and yeah, all that. It's small, so we don't have as much ground to cover as you guys.
Right. Well, that is one advantage to living in a small country is that oftentimes
Yeah.
bureaucracy is easier. It can be easier to get things done if the country is smaller. But if the country is smaller, there
Mm.
can be more tension and more competition too.
Oh yes, oh
So it just
yes,
depends. Hmm.
it does. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, how does, if you just take the country of New Zealand and you have a national conference each year, which in our note
Yes.
taker, apparently the conference is boring. So if I want to go to this boring conference each year for blind people in New Zealand, right? So how does
Yes.
a blind person get to this boring event? There's a lot of there's a lot of different cities, right?
Yes.
So
There are a lot
how
of
does
so.
transportation work in New Zealand? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
According to Remit, conference has to be held 1 year in the top half of the North Island and 1 year in the bottom half. So there's two islands in New Zealand, right? Two main islands, the North Island and the South Island, right? So according to Remit, conference has to be held in the top half of the north and the bottom half of the north, and then again in the top half of the south and the bottom half of the south. So if you're going outside of Auckland, Auckland is the largest city in New Zealand. That's where I live, and and so does 75% of the population. The bulk of the population lives in the North Island, which is 85% of the population lives in the North Island, or is it the other way? Is it 85% in Auckland and 75% in the North Island? I forgot. You'll have to check on Google. Um, you'll have to Google that one up. I forget the exact figures. But, so if you're going down country, you basically have to fly. And, a lot of people go to these conferences where, blind people unify and get together and plan the lobbying program kind of thing. Um, A lot of people fly. If you were going on the same island, you could take the train to part of it. Train trip from Auckland to Wellington is kind of cool. Wellington is the capital of New Zealand. That's where the government is. Um, there's no there's no provincial government. We got rid of provincial government years ago, like in the end of the 19th century. Yeah. What did you ask? I went on a tangent. Sorry. What
That's
did
what
you
I
want to
want. I
know?
want I want tangents. That's
So
what we
you're on
do.
tangents. Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Because I
So
went
I
on a
was asking, how
historical
would a
tangent.
blind person? What the
Oh,
question
how
is
would a
this: how
blind
would a
person
blind
get to
person get from
conference?
one conference to another?
Yes.
How do the airlines work in New Zealand? I mean, that's really what I would want to know. Yeah,
Okay, how the
definitely.
airlines work.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, okay. Um, we have a couple of airlines. We have two, I think Qantas flies here too. There's Air New Zealand and there's Qantas, right? Which Qantas is run out of Australia. Air New Zealand is the major airline for New Zealand, and they run multiple flights between multiple cities all the time, basically every day.
Right.
And yeah, public transport in Auckland. Well, it ain't as good as there. Well, I only went to California, but the thing when I was in California, the thing that struck me was the talking on the buses because, well, at that point we didn't have it, and we only just recently in Auckland got buses to talk on because of agitation by Blind Citizens New Zealand Auckland branch.
In other words, you're saying that the computer voice that would say like what the next stop is and what direction the bus is
Yeah,
going in, like that. Hmm.
yeah, that. And it's on the outside. Like we didn't have, the next bus is blah blah going to blah blah, and it's coming from XYZ or whatever it says. We don't have them on the outside yet. We only have them on the inside of the buses, but it's making catching the bus so much less stressful because we have those announcements, right? They just rolled them out in the last 2 years. And I used to tell people, because I used to catch the bus a lot when I was a student. I don't catch it as much anymore because I'm old and worn out. Well, no, I'm not worn out. Old and worn out is the wrong expression. Just catching a bus is really, really stressful, right? You have to flag it down. You have to make sure you get off at the right stop. You have to make all the stuff. And when it doesn't talk, you know, so I used to tell people, GPS is so awesome for blind people because we can get on a bus and track things with our cell phone. Now they talk and it's almost doubly awesome. So I'm going to save cab fares, I think.
Right. Sure. And that's another very fascinating facet to delve into and to digest as well. In American society, basically, we don't really use buses. I mean, there are buses,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll put it to you like this. They are not nearly as popular as they once were for a variety of reasons. One of the most
Yes,
obvious is that aviation has caught up with buses. But,
yes, yes,
70 years ago, 100 years ago, even, you would get on a bus and you would go all the way across the country. I mean, can you
yes,
still travel across America on bus or train? Yes. Do people do it? Sometimes,
yes.
but it would be pretty rare. And the
It's
stories
a
that we're hearing
tourist
have been
thing,
interesting.
right?
Not
It's a,
necessarily. Not, it wouldn't be necessarily exclusive for tourism. No, not
yeah,
necessarily. But traveling publicly in the United States and as in public transport is
yes,
not necessarily the easiest thing, for a long list
yeah.
of reasons. So
Mhm.
what can you tell me? Would you say that the bus system is well run in New Zealand? Are they
Oh, it
accommodating in terms?
sucks! It sucks! And the
Oh, okay.
drivers, you ask the drivers questions, they can't speak English half the time, so they don't talk to you. It really sucks. And the
Right.
trains here, the trains, they don't go, well, they like run through the middle of the city, basically. So, like, even in Australia, in Sydney, I've been to Sydney, the train, you can get on a train and you can actually go somewhere. You can go to a picture theater. You know, the trains here, well, they go somewhere, but nowhere where you really want to go.
Right, right. So maybe the trains are a little bit harder to use. So it sounds like
Yeah,
the
and yeah,
transportation system is like, and that's another factor, Mara, is if the country is mountainous or if there's a lot of geographic or geological or topographic or
yeah,
topography issues, it can make the transportation system very difficult or harder to use, And
yeah,
the other
yeah.
overarching thing that you said, how the drivers don't speak English. Well, I have some understanding of that only because quite frankly, Mara, if they spoke English, they may not want the job driving the bus. I mean, I'm not trying to
Pretty
tease
much.
it. I'm not trying to tease the
Yeah,
point, but the fact is
mm-mm.
that there's a reason. Some people, and it's a
Of
long
course,
list of reasons why they can't speak English, or a long
of
list
course,
of
yeah,
reasons why they want to drive the bus in the first place. Some of these people,
yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
learning about it more and more, come from developing nations where they are just trying to find a life and just trying to survive and just get through the day, which
Mm-hmm.
is
Yes,
the reality.
yes, yes.
Should they be willing and able to speak with you? Yes, but would I expect them to if they won't? Not necessarily, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of them, even if they do speak English, some of these bus drivers, they just drive. They don't know the route. You can't ask them where the stop is because they don't know. It's really stupid. Anyway, that's my rant about the bus.
Right, right. Well, probably what it is they're assigned to a certain route and they get into a rut of
Yeah,
just driving the route and they know where to stop on the route from their
yeah, pretty
GPS
much.
and they know where the
Yeah.
stops are, but it's harder for them to think ahead to the next stop, which that sort of does make
Mm-hmm.
sense, actually. I can understand where that would be a big issue. Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay. Well, I think that really sums up or is a good picture of transportation. The other issue with transportation for blind people that has been a big source of controversy is, of course, taxis and Ubers and
Oh
Lyfts and
yeah, taxis
rideshare.
and Ubers and
What's
ride
been going
sharing,
on? What's been
guide
going on with
dogs.
that? What's been going on with that in New Zealand? There's a lot of debate right now in the States about it.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
And we're having the same issues. In this country, they have ruled that Uber drivers are employees. There's a lot of issues with rideshare, and you can hardly get a cab in the city anymore. If you want to get somewhere fast, you've got to get an Uber, and the service is not as good as getting a cab, right? Well, I don't know if it's the same in America, but getting a cab, you generally get better service here. It just takes half an hour to an hour to arrive.
Right, right. Yeah, that's pretty similar to how it is in the States. It would depend. Certain
Mm.
cities are better than others, certain neighborhoods are better,
Yeah,
times of year are better than others days. The problem is it can be a very unpredictable matter. Absolutely.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Mm.
All right.
And
So
that's the problem with carriers.
right, is
Yeah.
the unpredictability. No, I get it. Absolutely. So you were saying
Mm,
how
mm.
the blind organization there in New Zealand, advocates for different issues. So what would you say are some main issues that the blind community is talking about in New Zealand? What are the main issues that are being advocated for?
What are the main issues? Oh, so many. I'd have to look them all up.
Well, but if you were to paint the picture of the most
Really,
important
if
or the
I
one
was
that's
to
most
paint
meaningful to you, yeah.
the most meaningful one at the moment is we have a card which you swipe in the cabs, and it gives you half price fares
Mm-hmm.
or 40% off fares. It's called the Total Mobility card. And
Mm-hmm.
well, some places in the country don't have, it's different across the country. Some places don't have a card. They have a voucher system that the driver has to fill out the details of the trip. But a lot of places the cards work now, and we're trying to get a nationally syndicated scheme, right? And we'll see what happens with that review. That review is going to be really interesting. We tried we tried to do an ADA for New Zealand, and some people are still agitating for an ADA for like an Americans with Disabilities Act for New Zealand. But that didn't happen because because the bill was a pile of rubbish. It basically set up a committee to monitor another committee to monitor the minister. But we are very lucky because we have the Ministry of Disabled People, Whaikaha. Um, That's the Maori name for it, Whaikaha. And I think we're the first country in the world to have a ministry for disabled people.
That is very intriguing. There's a ministry, and what do they call it in English? The Ministry of People with Disabilities?
Disabled people.
Yeah, that would be for a lot of different reasons. Listeners, when they hear it, might laugh a little, might chuckle a little
Yeah,
bit
I
because
know. I was laughing
because
when I first heard it.
it sounds like you could make a lot of jokes about that,
Oh
because
yeah, and people are. People are.
so well, I can understand that to a greater extent of the imagination. Absolutely. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you know about this Ministry of Disabled People? What is it truly supposed to do in essence?
I'm not even sure because, well, it depends who you talk to, but I suspect the government is looking to dissolve it because it's costing them too much money. Um, the government here, the right-wing government here is trying to make cuts on everything.
You said the right wing government, as in, what does
Yes,
that mean in the context of New Zealand? What does right wing? That doesn't mean, I mean, I understand
it
what it would
doesn't
mean in
mean Donald
America, but
Trump, right? It doesn't mean Donald Trump,
yeah,
but
it precisely doesn't mean that. That's why I'm asking, because right wing, left
yeah,
wing varies tremendously from country to country. So what does it mean in New
yes.
Zealand if you're right wing? What does that mean?
So if you're a right wing, you support taxing the rich. You support things like capital gains tax, like if you own a property, you have to pay money.
Okay.
And what else do you do if you're right wing? This is a big question. You support the farmers, which is kind of interesting because the National Party, which is the right wing party, the centrist right wing party, came out of the farming community in the middle of World War One. No, sorry, that's the date wrong. 1936. 1936, they formed the National Party. And what is now the left-wing party, just out of historical interest, came out of the union movement and all the mining strikes in the 19th century. Like, I think it was 1900, they formed the Labour Party. And so this is just political trivia now. This is what we are in now, national hardline neoliberals. And somebody said recently, I think it was my dad said this actually, that we are living under Rogernomics or Reaganomics. Reaganomics in the States, it was called Rogernomics here, and it was called Thatcherism in the UK, but that economic system, And yeah, that's what right wing is here. The Labour Party is well, I voted Labour the last election, I voted Labour because I figured they care about people more than the National Party do. So I voted for Labour, and and of course, you heard of Jacinda Ardern. Everybody loved Jacinda Ardern.
And who was
All
that
around
person?
the, you haven't heard about Jacinda? She was the Prime Minister of New Zealand during the COVID pandemic.
Right.
Well,
We
it's
we
still a pandemic.
vaguely we vaguely have heard of that person. I just wanted you to expand
Yeah.
out, like, and explain a little further. Yes,
She
absolutely,
was,
exactly.
and it's kind of interesting the way she turned up. In like 2019, there was an election here. Or was it? No, yeah, 2019, there was an election. Or was it a little earlier? Anyway, I can't remember when it was, but the leadership of the Labour Party had a big shuffle around. This is the short version. I forget the names of all the people involved in all this. And Ardern come out on top, right? And it was really fast. It was like the week before the election. And then everybody goes out on election day and votes. And Ardern was elected. Well, the party was elected. She was the leader of the party, so she became the prime minister. The party was elected in a landslide. Then, like, no, they were in for 2 terms, so it must have been a little earlier. Last year we had another election because election cycle is 3 years, and the National Party got in, um, also victoriously. I did not vote for them because I'm not a hardline neoliberal. But anyway, my dad did, and he'd been a Labour man for forever.
Right.
So
Sure.
he
Sure.
strategically voted.
That's
essentially.
yeah, and that's how people do it in the States. Your party is
Yeah.
basically based upon your parents, usually your family background, but oftentimes I have noticed
Hmm.
that people with disabilities overwhelmingly, in my opinion, typically have a liberal perception of society
Yes.
and have
Yes.
typically aligned with the Democrat Party in the United
Oh,
States, usually.
yes. Oh,
Hmm.
yes.
Right, right,
It's the same down here. But this is a tangent. Accessible voting.
right.
Do you have it over there?
Well. There's a lot of little silly things you could say about it. Well, it depends on the election. It depends if my
Yeah.
candidate wins, I thought it was accessible. If my candidate lost, I thought it wasn't accessible.
No,
I
no.
mean,
Can you
I mean, it only
cast
worked.
the
It
vote?
only worked. Oh, I'm just being facetious.
Can you?
Yes, yes, of
I mean,
course.
you can cast the vote because
Right.
we got telephone dictation voting for the 2016 election.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the
Right.
first time. I think that was the first time. And so what you do is you ring it. I did it for the first time last election, last year or year before, whenever it was, because I didn't want my dad to tick the boxes. Because I'm cynical and I think they'll find, if they want to find me, they'll find me. Even though what they do on the telephone is they give you a number and you call back on election day and you give them the numbers and then they tick the boxes for you. And then they have someone check that the boxes are ticked correctly on the forms and then they put them in a box. Essentially, I'm cynical and I think someone's going to find, or paranoid, and I think someone's going to find me on the electoral roll and know who I voted for, so it's not secret.
I mean,
But it's
here's
secret as we're going
yeah.
to get, right?
I mean, here's the interesting logic behind it. Everybody says in America, "Oh, my ballot's secret," and it is. Okay, but
Yeah,
realistically, with all the social media that we have now, everybody knows who everybody else voted
who
for,
everyone else is
whether
voting
whether you
for,
whether
yeah.
you admit it to your friends or not. Like, nothing's really secret because we know who our friends are and we know what their views truly are. If you know them well
Yes,
enough to call them a
yes.
friend. So, I mean, intellectually, is there truly a secret ballot, right? Is there
Yeah,
truly
yeah.
secret voting? Well,
No,
legally
there's not.
speaking, technically,
Legally,
yes,
there's supposed to
because
be.
the poll worker didn't look at my ballot, but is it truly secret? Well, no, not really, because then at the end of the day in America, a truck stops by the place and they pick up all the ballots, and then somebody looks at all the ballots and sees who everybody voted
Yeah,
for. So
yeah.
it
That's
is,
not
I
secret
would
in
say
my
that
opinion.
the election system in the United States, I would say that it's a secretive ballot, but not secret.
Yes, it's a secretive ballot. It's
Meaning,
not secret,
meaning
no.
the initial cast is not necessarily noticeable. But ultimately, though,
Mhm.
it's really not secret because, as I said, your friends know you. They know who you voted for, whether you admit to it
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not, whether you lie about it or not. And that's the thing. People sometimes, everybody does it in America. If you're going to fib, the thing that's typically that you have to do is everybody has to fib once or twice about who they voted for. And you can tell when they're fibbing, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Generally in
yeah.
America, we say, to only talk about who you vote for with your immediate family or people who you love and trust and truly you can truly
It's
know.
the
But
same here.
generally,
Yeah.
you don't talk about it publicly. But then again, if you're going into a public place to vote, you sort of are talking about it,
Mm.
though.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And the interesting thing, in America, you're allowed to have electioneering on election day.
What do you mean?
Like, the Democratic Party or your parties are allowed to go out and say, vote for me on election day. In New Zealand, we don't. You
Right.
have to
The
take all
candidate.
signage has to be taken down.
Right. Let me tell you, Mara, you could take a whole
Mm.
university course for an entire year to learn about the election laws in the United States, about who's
Of course
allowed
you
to put
could.
up a sign and how much money
Oh,
you're
there
allowed to
are
get. There's
rules. Yeah.
tons of regulation about it. It just
Yeah.
has to be followed. I mean, the answer is that ultimately, without talking about the candidates in particular, which is something we generally don't do here in Aaron's opinion. But I will say this. I'll say
Well,
that
yeah.
in a general stretch of the imagination, every election is a little bit different. Now, this last election
Sure.
was interesting and was a little bit abnormal, but I will say it was abnormal for a variety of reasons. But generally, the candidate who has more money usually does win the election because with more money, you can buy more ads, usually. So
Mm,
usually, whoever has more money wins it. But
yeah.
as we've seen over the past few years, it doesn't quite work out that way either. So I'm not terribly
No,
convinced of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
no, no.
Mm-hmm.
Because here we get for the national election,
Mm-hmm.
the TV and the radio offer time public television, which you don't pay for here. It's free. And public radio, which is also free. They offer the time free of charge for like 2 or 3 hours, maybe even more before the election, and all the parties get to advertise their stuff,
Right. Right.
which is
Absolutely.
kind of cool, I
That
guess.
is that, and there's ads in the United States and things like that. So that's good. So yes, Mara, we can definitely say that you vote, and I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
Whoever you vote for, I'm glad you vote, and I think that's a very important thing that all blind people, whether you vote
Yes.
Democrat or Republican in the United States, I think all blind people need to participate in the system and
Oh
need to vote
yes. Oh
because
yes.
because when we're voting, whoever it is, you're showing the government that you matter. You're saying, I'm
Yeah.
here and I
Yeah.
matter. And that's the real reason why you should cast the vote. Yeah. Hmm.
Of course.
Yeah.
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 That's what I reckon.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. Yeah. Well,
It's
another really,
here
mhm.
in some parts of the world. You here you have to be on the electoral roll. It's illegal not to be, but you cannot turn up on election day. Shut up, cell phone. You cannot turn up on a. Shut up, cell phone. You cannot turn up on a. You cannot vote, but you have to be on the roll if
Yeah,
you're
we've
of that
heard of
age.
that. We've heard of that. How in New Zealand, every federal law requires that people are registered to vote. They're registered. Right.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah, they're
registry.
registered. You have to be registered.
Right. But then does that
In
mean,
Australia, you have to vote,
yeah,
for example.
we've heard that story.
It's illegal not to
Well,
vote.
Well, let's not create more confusion than we've already created. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, let's
I
stick.
didn't really come here to talk about politics, but yeah.
Well, that's fine. No, I love
But
talking about culture, politics, society. This is why you're here is to educate the world about it, and I think it's so fun, so much fun talking about it.
mm.
So, but in New Zealand, you're saying that in New Zealand, the law says you have to be registered to vote, but you're not required to cast a ballot, right? If you don't want to, they
Uh-huh,
don't.
uh-huh.
Uh huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And in Australia, I think you're right. I think in Australia, you're
Yes,
both
I'm right.
required to be registered and you're required to cast a vote. Yeah. A lot of
Yes,
countries
yes.
have that system. And I think what would happen in America if we tried that is we would have, it wouldn't work in America. So the answer is you're neither required to register nor vote, but most people
Oh, mhm.
register and many
Yeah,
people do vote. So I don't,
yeah.
who knows? So the other interesting facet of your life, apart from your stellar knowledge of New Zealand history, society, organized blind movement, everything like that,
Yeah.
the other thing that you're very passionate about that I want to really unfold is your music, right? You're a musician, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I heard Pete Seeger's album, The Bitter and well, okay, this is partly through the story. When I was about 5 years old, I go to school. You start school when you're five in or roughly when you're 5 years old in New Zealand. So anyway, we're singing this song in school assembly. To everything, turn, turn, turn. And I go home. And Dad, you know the song? It goes to everything, turn, turn, turn. He goes, yeah, I know the song. And he pulled out this vinyl from like 40 years ago. I don't know when he got it, but anyway, he had it, put it on for me. It was Pete Seeger. It was a record called The Bitter and the Sweet. And that was the first recording of Turn, Turn, Turn in 1963. Anyway, it had a bunch of stuff on it. It had Little Boxes, which was his personal hit, Seeger's personal hit. Had Bells of Romney, had Which Side Are You on it, and I was totally hooked on American folk music. My wife, my dad likes to, and then later on, like 5 or so years later, I discovered Judy Collins, and I was totally hooked on American folk music. And that's just my
Right.
life went shit from there because I was hooked on American folk music from the time I was 5.
Yeah, I see. I see. Yeah.
This
There's
is
a, it is very, a lot of the American music, just like the music there, a lot of the American cultural music and folk songs from America, it's very attractive and very simple and very beautiful to listen to. So I think that people
yeah.
really relate to it. It's very, very, very relatable. So, so tell me, do you produce your own music? Have you written your own stuff? And is it on
I
Spotify?
don't. It's not on Spotify. It's all on SoundCloud. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, most of it is on SoundCloud. Most everything I think is right to put out is on SoundCloud. Most of it is covers. I haven't put out much. I don't write much. Has to be pretty special for me to write a song. But I have done a lot of performing for older people because they like old school music, essentially. And we've had sing-alongs and all sorts. And I played piano in one of the few contra dance bands in New Zealand.
Right. Sure. Sure.
Which sort of
Absolutely.
rolled up because of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Like I said, I started to play the piano when I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said I had a tarot reading from the artist of the New Zealand tarot deck. Anyway, she said to me one day, I was like 16, this woman goes to me, "What are your dreams?" And I said, "Well, I want to play harp and I want to go to Ireland." Because at that point I was obsessed with Irish music. Anyway, I play harp, folk harp, not concert harp. The folk harp has the levers on the top of the strings. Every single string has a lever, and it's smaller than the orchestral concert harp. So I learned to play that, but that's pretty easy to play because it's just like a piano stripped to the note. So if you're a pianist, you can play harp. Um, I also play Appalachian dulcimer and a little bit of tin whistle and some other stuff. But
Right.
yeah,
Right. Well,
that's
I agree with you. I think
background.
the harp is oftentimes a tremendously overlooked instrument that can be
Oh yeah.
it's an incredible instrument,
Mm.
when it's played just right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That truly is incredible thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, very, very good. Very, very good. So yeah, I mean, if your music is on SoundCloud, definitely give us the link for that so we can
You
send.
have it already.
Yeah, well, we can definitely include the SoundCloud link for your music in the description if you
Yeah,
like, of
sure, you have
course.
it already. Yeah, put it
Oh,
in
I
there.
have it already. Oh, I do. Oh, okay. You might have to
Yeah, you
remind
have it
me to show
already.
me later. Okay. Wasn't quite aware of that.
It's in the email with the paragraph.
It might be in there. It might.
It's in
I
the
do have
bottom
your, yeah, well, yeah,
with all
maybe,
the socials.
yeah. Okay, with all the, maybe if it might be a little bit easier for me. Maybe if you can simply send me just the
Just a
SoundCloud,
SoundCloud link?
might
Yeah,
make it
sure.
more noticeable. Yeah,
No,
not that it wasn't
okay.
noticeable, but a lot of times these things can be a little confusing. Well,
Yeah, I'll send it to
that's
you.
a really incredible thing, and I hope that you continue your passion and your interest and your
Yeah,
motivation in music. That's
I'm gonna carry on doing that. And teaching really motivates me. It's really fun teaching little kids to play because they keep you on your
oh,
toes a lot.
that's so good. I
Yeah.
agree with you. I agree with you. So when you work with children there and when you teach them how to play, what instrument do you usually teach them?
Piano. I'm
Oh, so
most of the
good.
time on the piano, so yeah.
So
I
good.
don't teach harp. I don't teach dulcimer. Dulcimer would be pretty easy to teach, but I think it's better to have a grounding in the piano than
Yeah,
in the
you need a
stringed
good
instrument.
foundation.
You need a
You
good
need a
foundation,
strong
yeah.
foundation before you start
Yeah.
delving into other things.
Yeah, you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So good. What's your favorite piece to play on the piano?
Oh, at the moment, I'm into Bergmuller. The
Mm-hmm.
Bergmuller Ballade in C minor, I think it is. I forgot what it's called.
Okay. Okay, that
I'll
is
send you a record. Do I have it on SoundCloud? No, I haven't put myself on SoundCloud playing that. I
why don't
put
you put
myself
yourself
on
put yourself on there? Why don't you put yourself on SoundCloud playing that? Go for it. I
because I
think you should
only
put
know
yourself.
half of it.
Oh,
Because I only know half of it. So like,
we'll learn the whole
explain the whole
thing. Well,
thing.
that's fine. You
Then we
can do
learn the
it.
whole
Learn the
thing.
whole thing. Learn the whole of it,
I'll
and
learn
then
the
put it
whole.
on there. Yeah,
And then I'll put it on
cool.
there. But there is a bunch of stuff on SoundCloud, including the last recording of Lottie Trevathan. Her stage name was Lottie Neville, and she was a really good pianist and singer, a jazz pianist about town in the 70s here in Auckland.
Sure,
And so
absolutely.
and the last recording she did before she died was to play piano for me and sing some harmonies for me. And I was like 18 and she
Mm,
was 64. Yeah,
right.
64. She had liver cancer.
Right.
Mm.
Absolutely. Well, what I was going to say about all this music stuff is,
Yeah.
if you do at some point, get it onto Spotify, which you should definitely do this. And the reason why it should be on Spotify is we at Aaron's
Hmm.
Opinion, we've compiled a playlist of all of the blind or disabled musicians I've interviewed over the years. And if
Oh,
they have
yeah.
tracks on Spotify, I've created a Spotify list, a Spotify playlist that can be shipped
Hmm.
all over the world. And it would be a great way to get your music out to the world. So if you,
Oh, yeah.
and there's several people after the conversation, a little later today, you'll be added into the group and you'll connect with the other musicians who are already there. And many
Yes.
of them you'll connect with very easily, I know. And they can
Hmm.
certainly help you to get your stuff onto Spotify, because once it's there, then it can be added into the playlist. And then there's
Yes.
all sorts
Yes.
of great songs on there that I've compiled from interviewing all the other blind musicians from all over the world. We have stuff from American country music. We have
Yes.
some modern music, Latin music. We have some music from
Oh,
Western
cool.
Africa. It's really
So,
cool. It's a
wow.
super
That
cool
sounds
list.
cool.
Yeah, which is why
Awesome.
one of your roles should be, figure out how to transfer. I can't fathom it would be that hard of a stretch.
Oh,
Figure
it's
out how to
not that hard of a stretch.
transfer
I think I
your
can do it, but
SoundCloud, upload your SoundCloud feed into the Spotify, and
through
then just create a Spotify.
Spotify, yeah.
And then once
I
you do
should
the
create, I
Spotify,
just don't know how to create one for artists. Don't you have to pay money or something?
I don't know one way or the other,
No, you
but
don't know. Okay,
I
I'll
don't know
have
one way
to,
or the
that's why
other
I
for
haven't
that, but
done
I
it,
know that
because
there are people here at Aaron's Opinion who definitely know and would be more than happy to help you with that. That's really
oh,
fun.
cool.
Yeah, creating songs on Spotify once you upload them is really powerful. And Spotify is always the world's most, one of the lead platforms in the world, of course. Yeah. Why,
Yes, it is.
do you listen to other podcasts, by the way, outside of, having nothing to do with Aaron's Opinion? Do you listen to other podcasts?
I listen to Double Tap religiously. I don't actually listen to many podcasts, but I do listen to Double Tap because I like the stuff they have to say about tech and stuff, because my other passion is technology. It kind of has to be a passion when you're blind. You have to be a little bit geeky,
Sure.
I reckon.
What about that's really good. So speaking of technology and things that we've never done. I've never interviewed Double Tap, by the way. I would like to learn more about that podcast. Actually, I've never interviewed
Oh,
them. We should
doubletaponair.com.
say it again. What? The
Doubletaponair.com is their website.
doubletaponair.com. Interesting. Well, we'll have to
Yeah,
see what we can do to
they're
get them on.
two guys from the UK. See, me get one of them on because they're real interesting guys. I think they both were journos, and one of them was a Scotsman and one of them is a Englishman. And
Oh,
I think
okay.
I think I think it's sponsored by Accessible Media Canada, and
I see. I
they
see.
run it.
Well, definitely send me that. You know what? Send me that podcast. Send it to me on Spotify
Yes,
if you
send
like,
it
and
to
I'll
you.
definitely investigate it, and we'll definitely get them on. That sounds like a lot of fun. But yeah, that's and I'm purely curious. Had you ever heard of
Hmm.
an Aaron's Opinion before Christy came up to you? I'm just
No,
curious.
no, I hadn't.
Totally fine, totally fine. But now you know.
And then I listened to the guy who had the PhD in chemistry. I'm like, whoa, this is cool.
Yeah,
He
he's
has a
ridiculous.
PhD.
He's
Yeah,
ridiculous. He is
sounds
ridiculous.
ridiculous. Sounds pretty ridiculous. Well,
He's
not in a good
amazing.
way. In a good
Amazingly
way, he's
ridiculous in a good
amazing.
way. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
that's really,
Yeah.
really good. Yeah, definitely. So you do that. So what are some tech things, if you were to advocate for technology, what are some tech things that you're really passionate about?
Oh, I love Apple products. I'm
Me
talking to
too.
you on a Mac,
Me
and I
too.
have an iPhone and a watch and iPad, so I have a whole set
Hmm.
of Apple products. And I
You
really,
have the whole orchard.
Yes, I have a whole orchard. I have home pods too. But anyway, I'm really passionate about apple products, and I think we need to get it more in the mainstream, really, because there's no excuse now for a student to spend 2 grand on Jaws and 2 grand on whatever else, the other assistive tech. There's in video too, but I reckon voiceover's quirks can be better dealt with as a blind person.
Right. Absolutely. That is very, very, very interesting. Sure, 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 sure.
Yeah,
Really, really good. Really, really good. You're so right. I think Apple's really incredible, but everybody has their own preference around the world
sure
too.
they
What
do.
they think,
Sure they do.
sure.
Yeah,
And that's really great. That's really great.
yeah.
So Mara, what are before we open the phone line to the South Africa office? What are
Yeah.
some questions you have for Aaron Richmond and Aaron's opinion? I'm sure you have some questions for me. Really make me sweat. Really get under my skin.
I'll make you sweat. Well, I used to be a wannabe journalist too, so I can make you sweat very easily. Tell me something interesting, like, hmm, what do you like to do in your spare time when you're not podcasting? What do you do when you're not doing this?
Well, I live. I,
Yeah, that's a good
I,
answer.
I breathe. I spend
Yeah,
an enormous amount. I spend an enormous amount of time consuming other podcasts, whether they're blindness related or not. I have a huge passion
mm,
for like creepy stuff, horror narrations, and scary stories. You know, I have
oh,
a
okay.
great passion for that, and other tech stuff and other political stuff, social stuff that goes on around the community.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, in a lot of these various blindness groups, so I follow a lot of the other blind discussions that are going on all over the world, and you know,
Are you on
that's the
Mastodon
true.
yet?
No, Mastodon. I don't really like
You
Mastodon.
don't use
I'm more of an
Mastodon?
X. I'm more of an X guy. I understand that there's some
Yeah,
tension
there's
about that,
those
but yeah. Mm.
thinking about X. I gave up on X. Well, I still have the account, but I gave up on it.
I
Oh,
understand.
because it's clunky. So I use Mastodon. And you can read me giving tech advice to people and talking to people on Mastodon. Anyway, the elephant in the room.
You know, certain apps I have found I've just liked certain apps more than others. Instagram more than other things. You know, very active there.
Instagram is actually really cool. I encourage blind people to use it more, actually,
I
because
think you're just beginning your Instagram journey, right? I think your account does not
I
have
have
many.
like, no, it has 100 and something pictures and some video footage.
How many followers do you have on Instagram?
I don't know. Like 50 or something?
Oh, okay, good. Good. I think
No,
we
I forget
follow.
how many. I'd have to go look it up. We follow each other on Instagram. But
Can
I've been
you
on Instagram for
could you
Instagram.
send me a DM on Instagram so that I know which account is yours? Because it gets very
Yes.
confusing. If you can DM me, that would be really good on Instagram. And then
I'll DM you.
certainly
Okay.
what I'll do, and this is a very important use of Instagram. I will send you a collaboration request when this episode comes out. And then what that means is that
Yes.
if you push accept collaboration request, that means that this episode will be automatically sent to your followers. So it's a very quick way
Oh.
of getting information out. That's why it's powerful. Right. Hmm.
Now that's cool. I didn't know you could do that on Instagram.
Well, that's kind of the point. That's why it's useful for podcasting because you can easily send information to
Check it
large groups
out.
of following.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it gets
I
reflected.
like, I put my best self on Instagram, so there's a bunch of shots up there of me doing stuff and me shooting other people doing stuff.
Ah,
And I could talk to you forever about blind photography, but like, yeah,
well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad that you do that. And I'm glad that I'm glad that you're really into that. I'm really fascinated by that. That is a very, very compelling thing and a very, very fascinating thing. Many blind people are very artistic.
yeah,
Certainly there's a spectrum just like anything else, but I do find that many blind
sure.
people are indeed very artistic about things and things
Yeah,
like that. So that is deeply compelling. Absolutely. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Definitely good. Definitely
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Really good. Well, we'll definitely connect there and all the other
We'll connect on
places,
Instagram, yeah.
all the
And
other
your other
places,
places
all
anyway.
the other places too. But Instagram, I find
Yeah.
can be especially powerful at the right time and things like that.
So do you just upload the video file of this episode and chuck
Well,
it on Instagram?
well,
Or
it's
do you upload the
interesting.
teaser?
Well, it's interesting what I do, and everybody has their own artistic flair. Everybody has their own brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I do, this is exactly why you should send me a DM so I can give you a follow to make the connection.
Yeah.
That's exactly why you should be following me. So what actually happens in the Instagram end, you would receive a notification that I sent you a collaboration request, and what it would be is it would be, your profile picture and things like that.
Yes.
And then it would be the description of the episode. And then in the
Mm-hmm.
comments of the post, you would find both usually the Apple Podcast link to the episode and the YouTube
Yes.
video. And then that's how I'm able to
Oh.
push out the content in that way. So you get people interested in the initial, delivery
Yeah.
of learning
Yeah.
about it. And then they can think, well, if I really want to know, let me go down to go into the comments and dig out the information that way. And I have found
Yeah.
that that is a very interesting and compelling way of,
Yes. Yes.
conveying information. But to go back to your question, your beautiful question, and you are such a great friend to have in the Aaron's Opinion family for sure. No question. Christy was so right as always. You're an incredible person. Absolutely. You're an
Oh, thank you.
incredible,
Thank
your whole like aura is so attractive in the podcast space, and you're just such a great supporter. You're just doing such great stuff. But to answer your question, yeah, I have a huge interest in language acquisition.
Yes.
Being a teacher, being a bilingual guy, that's one of my main interests. In fact, I was
Mm-hmm.
actually working on getting some other language teachers to come to the show to geek out about language acquisition and things like that. But that's pretty geeky. Some of the episodes
Yes,
at
that's
Aaron's
very
Opinion, we
geeky.
really go off on tangents and delve into very specific sections of interest that would not be of interest to most people. But
Yeah.
after all, if I think it's interesting, it's got to be fabulous, right? If I think
Gotta
it's
be interesting to someone
it's
else
got to
too.
be interesting.
Yeah, someone's
If I
gotta
think
want
it's
to
I mean
read that.
if I think it's good, it's great. But
Yeah,
I will
yeah,
tell you
pretty
that that's
much.
mostly what I do. I spend an enormous amount of time teaching, doing some stuff like that around the community. I'm active in my community where I live. I give back to my
Yeah.
community. I live an active life, and as we say, as is commonly said, um, in the famous verses of the famous song, one of the last lyrics goes, something to the effect of, "I'm just doing the best that I can," and that's
Sure. Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
one of my philosophies in life is that you just have to realize that life is not perfect, and we all have to do the best we can. So before we turn it over to Latabo from South Africa, all right, any final questions that you have to ask me
No,
that you
no further
well,
questions.
good. Yeah, I love your direct. You New Zealand people really get to the point. Nope, nope. Yeah, very, very direct people. Other
Yes,
nationalities kind of beat around the bush.
yes.
Well, then I'll be very direct. Okay, let's go. Let's go on down to South Africa. You're
Let's
going to
go to
be
South Africa.
very good friends with this person. He is one of our
What's this
greatest.
guy's name?
His name is
Latobo?
You got it. Pull up
Latobo.
the
Pull up the thing and I'm the computer. Let's have a chat.
pull up the chart here. One moment. That's being a little. No, definitely not. Ah, all right. It takes it a minute. Go ahead, Latabo, when you're ready.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me just say. Let me just check the time. 12 South African time. So, yeah, I just want to say that actually I don't have a question, but I can say that I have a comment. So what I can say is
Yeah.
um yeah. Okay, if you guys can hear me, hold on. I just want to put
Perfectly.
this so.
Yes,
Yeah.
perfectly, yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, cause I knew that some people couldn't hear me, so I had to adjust it. So I was saying that I have only a comment on the topic that was being shared around here, or conversation that was had. One thing I can say, great work to Aaron and
Thank you.
also to the guest. Yeah.
Mara is
Thank you.
incredible. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, she is. Well, one thing I can say is, wow. I mean, wow. I was just only like, I didn't know much about New Zealand because I was like kind of literally I only knew about rugby, but the whole country, about
Rugby, of
like the
course.
whole diversity, the whole variety of the country when it comes to like New Zealand and its culture, like diverse culture and all those things. I mean, like I didn't know much about those. I only knew about like rugby and how it pans out when it comes to like rugby and all that stuff. So that's one thing I
Yeah,
can
I
say on
forgot to
that.
mention rugby. I forgot to do this, so I just forgot to talk about rugby. New Zealanders I'm not rugby fan, but some folks are.
Do you have
I
any
know, I
do
know.
you have
It's
an
just that it
aspiration to
just
be a famous? Do you want to be a famous rugby player, Mara?
No, I'm too old.
Well, that's
You
that's a
you
good
have to
answer no
start
matter
when you're
what.
like 20s, so like by the time you're at 20, they're famous. And then they play until they're like 35ish. And I'm too old, so
And
yeah.
then if they're able to,
ah.
and then if they're
What?
That's the same age as like when you play in soccer. Like when you like when you get to that stage of like
right.
35,
Yeah.
that's when you retire.
Exactly. Exactly. But the joke
Yeah.
behind it all is that rugby is a brutally violent game.
It
Yes,
is.
I
It
And
know.
is.
if you
It's
have
pretty
any,
awesome.
It
the joke here that Americans think it's funny is if you had any, if you have any, if you're that smart, you would play football and never play rugby. You would have the sense to know that rugby is just too
Too
rugby is
dangerous.
but the
crazy.
American but Aaron, the American football, it's more or less the same as like rugby. Like
Yes,
I
it
have
is, but
noticed
it's
that.
stupid. My dad
But
says
people in other
Yeah.
countries think it's
American
stupid. Yeah,
football
they
is
wear these big
stupid.
clunky helmets.
Because they
It's
wear those big
yeah.
clunky helmets and all they have to do is get a ball over a line. Like rugby is more complicated. Because they have two poles at each end of the field and you have to get the ball by one end.
But it's the same as rugby though. That's one thing I
It's
can say.
similar. There's some parallel. There's
Yeah.
It's
some
similar,
parallel.
yeah.
There's some
Yeah, it
similarity.
is similar.
But the answer is rugby is ridiculously more dangerous than American football. American football is still ridiculously dangerous too, but the level of violence is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah, yeah.
People do play it now in the States. Rugby, I forgot all about
Yes.
it. Rugby is played now more in the States, and people sort of know what it is a little, you know.
True.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I think so. The top of thank you so much as always. We'll definitely get
No, it's my
Mara into the
pleasure.
WhatsApps, and we'll
No
definitely keep
problem.
talking over there in the WhatsApp. Great, great to
No
have both
problem.
of you, and seriously have a wonderful night over there in South Africa. And Mara,
Yeah.
who is so far ahead of any time zone, any stretch of the imagination, she has the whole day. It's actually late morning now in
Tomorrow.
New
It's
Zealand.
Late morning
tomorrow.
already.
It's always a
Yes.
ridiculous thing, yeah, which is hysterical. It's how what a severe gap it is over there in New Zealand. Absolutely, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Any so Mara, before we
Yeah.
head out today, any final things? Any final things you would want people to know about Mara, about ways that you can be reached, ways that you can be contacted, things like that? You know, what do you think?
Oh,
Somebody wants to get
contact stuff?
yeah.
Somebody wants to get in touch?
Yep.
Instagram, musicalmara87. Facebook, I forget what the username is for the public page. If it's a public page, it's Mara Kelland Music Studio. Doesn't have much on it.
Did you give me that
No,
page?
I don't think I gave you that.
You definitely need, it's really important
Okay, I'll give it to
so
you.
that can be tagged along so that we can do a parallel tagging to make sure it's tagged as your creator page. That is super important that I have that. Super,
Okay, I'll
super,
give you
super
that.
important.
I'll have to
Wow,
look
I'm
up
glad
the
we brought
address.
that up. Sheesh.
Yeah, I'm glad, because I didn't give it to you. I'm just like,
That's
but
okay.
you can get in touch
Now
with
we
me
know.
there.
Okay, so they can go there, and how else can you be reached?
And MaraKelland.com, they can go there too. It's all linked in the description, right? You
Should
have
be.
that.
Should be. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And SoundCloud has the messaging feature if they want to message you there. And email, of course, which is floating around the internet. They can find it on the website. Yeah.
That's true. Mara, welcome from my heart to yours, from our heart here in the Aaron's Opinion family. Welcome aboard New Zealand. Welcome aboard, Mara. We are honored and pleased and just so glad to have you as now the New Zealand office, the New Zealand representative of Aaron's Opinion. So absolutely, we'll definitely connect in a bit.
Yeah.
I would like you to enjoy
What's
the
up?
rest of your morning and because I'm so far behind you, I would like to see what else I should be doing. Maybe go get something to eat, go get a drink or something
Yep.
like that, and relax with
Lunchtime
my family.
here.
But seriously, absolutely magnificent talk, and we will certainly connect a little later today over in the WhatsApps. All right, Mara?
Sure. See you then. I'll send you some stuff.
That sounds super good. Super good. So, all
See
right,
you
everybody.
then.
Well, until next time, from whether you're listening to us, whether you're pushing download in America, South Africa, or New Zealand, we wish you a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or middle of the night. Until next time, we will certainly be back next time with the next incredible guest. And we need to talk about that, Mara. We'll talk. We'll definitely, this is not your
We'll
last time
figure
on the
that
show. You
out.
do realize there's going to be a bit of a just a bit of a operation here. We got to get the other person on them, and then we got to get both of you on, and then that's going to be incredible when we have 3 episodes that include you. My God. All right. So that's a good cliffhanger. That's a good reason to keep downloading these and keep listening.
Yep.
So until next time, thank you so much, Mara. Thank you, Latavo, and the whole world.
No problem.
Back soon. Yeah, we'll be back soon. And as we always like to say, help one person today, help 1 million people.
1 million people tomorrow.
You got it, man. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Take care.
See you then.
See you.